In just a few moments from now. We request everyone to kindly get settled. And for those of you who are still having your tea or in the tea area, may I request you to please join us in the main hall now. You may feel free to carry your cups of tea and coffee to your seats. In just a few moments from now, we will begin our today's program. I'd also like to request all of our delegates to kindly keep their phones on a silent mode. Thank you. Good morning. It is India Environmental Social Governance Conclave 2022. The challenges, opportunities and the way forward is a theme for our today's program. And we bring you this program. The program is brought to you by ASSOCHAM India. Now we'd like to begin with the inaugural session, and I request all of you to please put your hands together and join me in welcoming, first of all, our guest of honor, Shri S.C. Garg, former Finance Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Government of India. I'd like to invite him to kindly light the ceremonial lamp first and inaugurate our today's program. I'd also like to invite Shri Sunil Jain, Operating Partner, Energy Transitions with SR Capital, Shri Ram Babu P, Chief Sustainability Officer, Greenco Group, Shri Prabodh Acharya, Co-Chairman ASSOCHAM National Council for Environment and Climate Change, and CSO JSW Group, Mr. Kapil Malhotra, Co-Chair of the ASSOCHAM National Council on Chemical and Petrochemical and Global Business Unit Head with GFL. Lighting the ceremonial lamp, the auspicious lamp to seek the blessings of the Almighty and thank Him for a new day of learning. With that, ladies and gentlemen, our today's program has now been formally inaugurated by our distinguished dignitaries here. We thank you all for being here and request you to now kindly get settled. I'll request all of our dignitaries to please join us on the dais, requesting Shri S.C. Garg, our guest of honor, Shri Sunil Jain, Shri Ram Babu P, Shri Prabodh Acharya, Shri Kapil Malhotra to please join us on the stage. And I'll request all of you to once again please join me in welcoming them with a huge round of applause. Shri Sunil Jain will be joining us shortly. We'd like to welcome Shri S.C. Garg, our guest of honor today, extend him a green welcome. I'll request Shri Kapil Malhotra to kindly present that little plant sapling to Shri S.C. Garg and extend him a very warm welcome on behalf of all of us here at ASSOCHAM, as plants are a symbol of prosperity and growth. Wishing you plenty of growth and success, Shri S.C. Garg. And thank you for joining us on our today's program. And with that, it's time for me to now invite Shri Kapil Malhotra for the welcome address. Please welcome him, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. अभी तो सुबह है, सो मत यार. Good morning from everyone. I expect, please wake up. Okay. It is my proud privilege to welcome you all in today's ASSOCHAM India ESG Conclave 2022. We are delighted that Shri S.C. Garg, former Finance Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, Shri Prabodh Acharya, Co-Chairman, ASSOCHAM National Council for Environment and Climate Change, Chief Sustainability Officer, JSW Group, and Shri Ram Babu, Chief Sustainability Officer, Greenco Group, and Shri Sunil Jain, who couldn't come in time. He's probably stuck up in the traffic. So I thank all of them to grace the occasion, and thank you very much, Garg Sahab, for being present over here to give you guidance. Well, coming to the ESG, now ESG stands for environment, social and governance. I think everyone knows that. However, the main focus of ESG is people, process and product. So right now when we talk about the fact that the environmental issues are creating a lot of buzzword in the global scenario, we're talking about carbon emissions. So countries across the world are making commitments to net zero emissions and charting plans towards this ambition. A systems perspective probably is required, incorporating energy demand management, improving energy efficiency, which always for any chemical engineer has been a challenge all through the centuries, and probably increasing the share of clean energy in the overall energy mix. Now that's the goal probably the entire global arena is now concentrating on. So as we are entering the age of consequences from the climate change, decarbonization and net zero are no longer the buzzwords for business to sustain. Now they are realities which need to be adopted rapidly. As we are running out of time, we are seeing in the last 2-3 years the kind of hurricanes, the kind of flooding in some area, the droughts in some areas, what climate change is doing. So hence the need of the hour of the businesses across the globe is to go the ESG way, to play their role in sustainable development of the complete environment and global society as a whole. The ESG transformation is catching on as a new age movement that companies have to embrace for better survivability and performance and the overall good of the planet Earth. Now, the environmental criteria consider how a company's operational processes help in preserving the environment for future generation. So similarly, within the social criteria, the regulators will examine how the company manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers and communities. Let me tell you that in our own company, I am leading the sustainability drive. And from last 2 years, we have been working on these very aspects itself. And I can vouch for it that all these activities, when we are going through them, going through the audits, going through the developments for these certification programs, we are seeing that how it is helping the organization to grow culturally and become more sustainable. I think this is something what the entire audience who is there and the entire, the business world probably is looking forward to, how the ESG criteria and how the SDG goals can help us in making the move towards a sustainable development. The governance criteria involve the responsibilities and rights of the company's management, the stakeholders and shareholders, relationships within the company, the rights of the employees being protected, and their welfare as the relationship with the stakeholders and protection of their rights. The last decade has witnessed rapid climate change. We are all seeing it in front of us. In fact, these climate changes are happening pretty often now. COVID is still prevalent, almost on the extinct, but still it keeps on jumping around. And these shocks have brought financial crisis and instability globally. Currently, we are seeing that how the world economy is going for a spin, how the Fed government is increasing rates, how the Ukraine and Russia war is, changed the whole dynamics of the supply chain. The energy crisis in Europe is, putting its head up. Some of our colleagues, our friends in Europe are now wondering what is going to happen in the winters, which has already started. Without gas, how are they going to sustain in a minus 35-degree temperature there? I mean, this is something which, is putting up its ugly head. So all these things are sparing no country and impacting governance, business, civil societies. infrastructure all over. So this definitely calls for accelerating the ESG transformation process. I think if there is any time, this is the time now. So we, the stakeholders, policymakers, shareholders, and the common people have to think alike in pursuing sustainable growth and find diverse ways at micro and macro levels to push it. We have a lot of expertise today available with us, and in the morning chat I was having discussions with all of them, and I think everyone probably believes that on the macro level as well as on the micro level, the policies or the movements of the companies have to go towards one direction, which is towards the sustainability. The investors and lenders have become highly sensitive. I know in any of the AGMs now or any of the investors meet, or some of my customers from global arena, every second day they send us questionnaires asking us about our sustainability drive towards the carbon depletion, towards the water circularity, towards the labor rights, human rights. So all these things are becoming very important aspects, and we need to really start focusing on these areas in a much more focused manner than we were doing earlier. And they are also cautious towards environmental issues, matters which are social in nature. They are investing in companies and projects that use the ESG criteria to gauge and measure their ESG transformation. And hence they use it as a barometer to screen the potential investment. So let me tell you that a lot of investors are seeing that what are the sustainability drives of every organization. So it is a fact that any investment which is coming from across the globe, it is basically coming towards those businesses which have a sustainable nature. The move towards the non-financial reporting of companies, that is now most of the companies who are going for a sustainable drive, apart from the annual report, they are also putting up the sustainability report, which is becoming mandatory now. It may be an integrated report or it may be a separate report, but a sustainability report is also becoming a part of the annual report for most of the organizations across the globe, including India. And setting the long-term priorities, making the ESG issues embedded and factored in concept, vision, mission, and implementation at multiple levels, which are the steps probably in the right direction at the moment, considering the current scenario. Moreover, to move the ESG conversation from the boardroom to a level of operational transformation, it is critical to embrace circularity across operations while appreciating how the circular economy is becoming a business imperative and not just a reporting consideration. Now, it's a fact, let me tell you that somewhere around 10 years back in Singapore, I know that the management over there, the government over there, had seen to it that there is a water circularity, and whatever was the waste water treatment coming out of the effluents, it was at least used for the washing purposes or the plant purposes. Probably now at 2020 onwards, they claim to have achieved 100% water circularity, even making the water potable now. So this is probably the barometer which is there in front of us in India, that not even to make a water circularity in terms of just using in the industrial usage of the water, but also see to it making it potable, to see to it that each human being gets there is no wastage of water. So vital to achieving the ESG transformation for a company is to simultaneously pursue the digital transformation. This is something very, very important. In fact, the life cycle assessment analysis, there are a lot of software companies now who are doing the end of life or the life cycle assessment. In fact, our company itself is going through one of that for our products. So this will focus on digitizing business models and operational processes and aim at reducing the frictions, increasing productivity, elevating profitability, and improving the customer experience. The risks, the compliances, performances, sustainability issues, and pitfalls, all required to be measured against the ESG parameters, and this can only be feasible with the help of digital tools and processes. So I think all this is pretty well known to us. And in fact, we are an economy which is pretty well digitalized. Let me tell you that very proudly, a lot of my European counterparts or European customers say that we in India, or our company, or our businesses from India, wherever they deal with, we are much more digitally advanced than those guys are. I think this is a credit to our own processes. So probably our own strength in the software and digitalization process will help us in moving towards the ESG goal much faster than probably what we can imagine. We are glad to have a very strong panel of industry leaders, sustainability officers, some of them are present over here, financial institutions on the subject. I would encourage all of you to make this forum more interactive and leverage the views and insights of the experts who would address us during the discussions. I would also like to extend my very special thanks to all the sponsors, respected speakers in the panel discussion session, participants and friends from media who have very kindly joined us in this morning. And I thank you very much for patiently listening to me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra, for your remarks. And it's time for me to now invite Shri Prabodh Acharya, the co-chairman of the ASSOCHAM National Council for Environment and Climate Change. He's also Chief Sustainability Officer at the JSW Group. I'll request you to now share with us your thoughts and perspective. Please welcome him with a round of applause, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Good morning, friends. Respected dignitaries in the dais. I was wondering while listening today to Kapilji, being a business leader talking about sustainability and taking charge of sustainability, I was so feeling pleased. It was like music to my ears. So I am a sustainability professional. My job is to convince these people to integrate sustainability into their business practices. So thank you very much for taking that lead, and I'm so pleased today. And I see this trend increasingly getting integrated, sustainability getting integrated into the business practices across the globe and specifically in Indian corporates. I always call that I come from a very small tribe, but the CSO tribe is becoming a community nowadays. And that's a good sign, those who are in this professional fields. I was asked to give a keynote in the capacity of co-chair of ASSOCHAM National Council for Environment and Climate Change. And this time, therefore, I thought, let me talk something about how to build resilient industry growth through ESG and how to unlock low carbon future for the businesses. I sincerely believe, people talk about sustainability has many meanings, and I have not really had two people agreeing on the same definition as yet. But one thing everybody agrees, one language, that's the money language. And everybody in the business specifically accept the fact true building of a business practices is to have a healthy bottom line, and that is possibly the sustainability meaning is. And we get different terms evaluating evaluations of different terms through different phase of the time as we go forward. So we heard about triple bottom line, we heard about sustainability. Nowadays we are hearing ESG, the term coined possibly 15 years before. But that's getting momentum right now. One thing, before I start my keynote, which I have prepared this time, to speak and to reconfirm my idea, those who are familiar with CSRs, and 2% of your profit is CSR. But believe me, 100% of your profit is sustainability. Well, with that, let me read out my prepared speech now. See, the industrial sector has evolved considerably in the past year to include a notable emphasis on environmental, social, and governance practices. The rising focus on ESG performance is based on the increasing indications which show that companies benefit when they have policies in place for managing and quantifying ESGs. Without quantifications, we can't really know what's the benefit. While efforts towards the same have long been comprehended a cost center, and that is what I was accustomed to when I started my career 30 years before, and I used to be always backbencher because we ask always for money. In recent years, that notion has been refuted, and ESG management has been recognized at the center of incredible value creations for an organization. We saw some example, Kapilji talking before me. With more and more leaders recognizing that ESG and sustainable growth strengthen financial resilience and overall performance, it is an opportune moment to say that accelerated industry growth can be achieved through embarking on a journey of sustainable evolution. Organizations with a strong focus on sustainability, what I mean is that when the sustainability is integrated to business practices, endure reduced cost of capital due to better risk management, enhance investor perception, and we heard just before that how each investor are nowadays asking questions on ESG performance, and believe me, as the chief sustainability officer of a group, nowadays majority of my time is going to spend with the investor responding to their questions. Enhance and increase access to sustainable financing market, and that is where JSW is a classic case where we raised almost $2 billion last year in sustainability linked financial instruments. ESG compliance also steers various other factors like revenue growth, profitability, customer satisfaction, and employee retention among many of those. Solid ESG credentials therefore bolster the organization's bottom line while simultaneously enhancing their access to the capital of the capital as well. Evidence points to a strong positive correlation between financial and ESG performance. As part of it can be accredited to saving achieved through reduced energy consumptions, more efficient use of resources, which Kapilji alluded to, the circular economy, and all these examples what we see. However, a strong ESG focus also allows companies to seize new business opportunity that might otherwise have been inaccessible to them. The case in example, what we see, the growth in the renewable sector and the energy transitions. And you must be hearing a term called clean tech after fintech being so popular nowadays. So these are the opportunities, new opportunities when you talk about ESG. Such clear financial benefit make a compelling case for the organizations to take a leading role in setting and aligning sustainability and financial targets. Let me talk about global risk. The Global Risk Report 2022, which every year since last 10-15 years World Economic Forum is publishing through a global risk perception survey that gathered insight from nearly 1,000 global experts and leaders who responded to that global risk perception survey. The report confronts us with a worrying reality. Societal and environmental concern takes the forefront in leading the list. Asked to take a view of the past 2 years, responded to the GRPS, which is Global Risk Perception Survey, perceives societal risk as those that have worsened the most since the pandemic began. However, over the 10-year horizon, the health of the planet dominates the concern. Environmental risks are perceived to be the 5 most critical long-term threats to the world and therefore to the business. The most potentially damaging to people and planet with climate action failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, these are the top 3 risks from the risk perception survey in that order. Responded to the GRPS ranked climate action failure as the #1 long-term threat to the world and the risk with potentially the most severe impact over the next decade. Climate change is already manifesting rapidly in the form of droughts, fires, flood, resource scarcity, and species loss, among other impacts. In last year, if you see multiple cities around the world, as Indians, we are very familiar with the extremities of the weather, but it is now the world is experiencing with the temperature not seen before years. Such a record high of 42.7 degree in Madrid over a 72-year low of minus 19 degrees centigrade in Dallas. And regions like the Arctic circle have average summer temperature to be 10 degrees centigrade higher than in the previous years. So government, business and societies are facing increasing pressure to thwart these worst consequences. While COVID-19 lockdown saw a global dip in greenhouse gases, we saw clear sky and many pictures coming that Himalaya is being seen from the distance. Upward trajectory soon resumed once the COVID faded out. The GHG emissions rate rose faster in 2020 than the average over the last decade. Countries continuing down the path of reliance on carbon-intensive sector risk losing competitive advantage through a higher cost of carbon, reduced resilience, failure to keep up the technological innovation, and limited leverage to trade agreements. We have seen EU ETS price touching almost $100 or 87, 80 euros. Yet shifting away from carbon-intense industries will trigger economic volatility, deepen unemployment, and increase societal and geopolitical tensions. Adopting hasty environmental policy will also have unintended consequences of future. And please remember, I represent a group which we have carbon-intensive industries. So therefore, it is more important for organizations like us to align ourselves with low-carbon pathway. So it is thus accurate to say that business risk perception across the globe is irrecoverably undergoing a systemic change, with environmental and societal risk taking predominance in global risk perception. However, it is essential to exercise prudence and ensure that the delicate balance between mitigative, restorative, and preventive actions and policy changes and their actual impact on society, environment, and the economy remains undisturbed. A transition that fails to account for these implications will exacerbate inequalities within and between countries. If the three trends, if you see, glowing, inequality is one of them. A rapid decarbonization would increase economy and societal disruption in the short term, while a slower pace with fewer short-term impacts would entail much larger cost and greater disorderliness in the long term. Historically, organizations have shielded externalities that arise from their operations. However, sustainability reporting these days is a must. That again, I'll borrow from Kapilji, you stated how it is increasing reporting. On a global scale, the voluntary framework and legislative instruments that currently guide ESG disclosure are in a state of rapid evolutions. In recent years, organizations have had to determine independently which of the numerous voluntary ESG performance standards are best suited to their operation and to the stakeholder demanding data. As pressure for ESG data intensifies, legally mandated disclosure obligations are becoming increasingly common, with more looming on the horizon. I call it we are in an alphabet soup, and there are standard or framework like GRI, SSAB, TCFD, now TNFD, CDP, and there are many terms. So making a sense out of the alphabet soup, we need to go for an acronym stew so that it should be palatable to us. The ESG reporting landscape is now rapidly moving toward globally harmonized disclosure standard, and that's a good thing. In June 2021, the G7 finance minister and central bank governors clearly committed to addressing ESG challenges and moving quickly towards deeper multilateral economic cooperations. They endorsed the work to develop global standard that could form a global baseline of sustainability informations. Another sign of change came in the form of report by the International Organizations of Securities Commissions, IOSCO, that emphasized the crucial role the finance sector has to support the transition to a more sustainable future. Putting this into action, the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation, with the endorsement of the G7, G20, and IOSCO, is preparing to establish an International Sustainability Standards Board to sit alongside the International Accounting Standard Board and develop this global standard that can form a global baseline for sustainability informations. Regulators in individual jurisdictions are also moving. The European Union has been driving forward its work on sustainability reporting, demanding more detailed disclosure across a wide range of sustainability matters from companies wishing to operate in or with European Union. In the United States, we saw this Securities Exchange Commissions is demanding climate disclosure in the reporting. The TCFD recommendations are voluntary by nature and applicable to organizations across sectors and jurisdictions. Those who must be wondering about TCFD, the full form is Task Force for Climate Change Related Financial Disclosure. It has come at the directions of the G20 finance ministers, and it was published in 2017. And believe me, nowadays, most of the investors, lenders are started asking organizations to align with climate change risk and opportunities. While you see in UK and New Zealand have made ambitious progress in their commitment to the TCFD framework, they are not the only one. Governments all across the globe are examining how to incorporate the TCFD recommendation and principles into their own policy response to climate change and mitigations. You have seen a policy paper coming from RBI recently also. Switzerland is expected to introduce mandatory TCFD requirements in the near future, and Hong Kong is in full swing to make mandatory TCFD alignment disclosure for financial institutions and listed companies by 2025. Closer home, in India, you must have all heard about BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, being mandated from next year for the top 1,000 company who are demanding more quantified informations. So the emerging landscape of regulation across multiple jurisdictions is at risk of becoming increasingly fragmented, which is already a challenge given the complexity of global business and the overall pace of change. And that is why even those who have been proactive in their reporting to date still need to be ready to deal with the new regulatory landscape. Believe me, we as a group reporting the sustainability and integrated reporting for last 15 years, but with all the change in the landscape, we are finding it's very difficult to align, even in the new requirement which has come in BRSR. It is so granular and detailed data the regulator are trying to get from the organizations. Now let me talk about global emissions. Global greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise at a time when they need to be rapidly falling. Global CO2 emissions from energy combustion and industrial process rebounded in 2021 to reach their highest ever annual level, a steep 6% increase from 2020 level, pushing emissions to 36 gigatons as per the IEA Global Energy Review. Emission increased by over 2 gigatons from 2020 level. Just to make a sense of what these figures are, we have to deal with a carbon budget of around 500 to 600 gigaton to keep us in 1.5 degree trajectory. The way we are moving, if we continue doing that, we'll soon be out of the carbon budget. Global CO2 emissions from the industry sector rebounded back to their 2019 level, driving by increase in both advanced economies and emerging market along with developing economies. The rebound of global CO2 emissions above pre-pandemic levels has largely been driven by China. However, CO2 emissions in India rebounded strongly in 2021 to rise 80 million ton above 2019 level, led by growth in coal use for electricity generation. Coal-fired generation reached in line with high in India. This was in part because the growth of renewables slowed to one-third of the average rate of the previous 5 years. We talk about that we are increasing. In the IPPU sector, that is industrial process and product use sector, that contributes approximately 7% to India's total GHG emissions, as per an estimate from GHG Platform India, the cement, iron and steel, the chemical industries account around 89% of IPPU sectors. I am part of that. Now, because I am from JSW and is the largest producer of the steel, let me talk a little bit of steel before I close this. Decarbonizing steel production, which contribute around 0.7% of global GDP while generating around 7% of global CO2 emission, is a vital step towards achieving a net zero world. In India, we are producing almost 10 to 12% of the emissions, energy sector emissions, and contributing to 2% of the Indian GDP, which is obviously not fair share of the carbon space. And therefore, we have a responsibility in the steel sector to decarbonize rapidly. And I believe if Indian steel sector can follow a sustainable development scenario pathway and reduce at least 60% of their emissions by 2050, then we will be in the right path to transit. So embarking on this journey to shape the market for green steel will require addressing three major strategic definitions or considerations. One is definitions, demand generation, and adequate supply of green steel. So further, the Indian steel industry doesn't have an agreed methodology to evaluate GHG emission, and hence it is important to adopt a specific methodology in this context. Although I will not talk much really about the steel industry here because I understand it's a general ESG conference. But one thing I will like to state that JSW as a group is taking a lead in decarbonizing from the various businesses. We have kept ourselves a demanding target to further reduce. And what I would like to conclude for the steel sector decarbonization, a vibrant steel industry has historically been the foundation of a nation's rapid industrial development. In fact, before the meeting when we were discussing that energy transition is happening rapidly, I'm sure Rambabu will talk about the green energy transitions. And I was asking a question, for all this, somebody has to make steel so that you can produce solar and renewable energy. Now, question is that, can we make that steel in an efficient manner and contribute to the decarbonization of the whole sector? As we all know, India has committed a net zero target by 2070. If we have to achieve one thing, we have to keep in mind that all sectors and all industry will not move in the same pace. Some will decarbonize faster than others. So we have to keep that in mind while we are putting our strategy. At the end, I think it has been a long keynote. I will wish all the success for the conference, healthy discussions that we can take away, and integrate sustainability with our business practices. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you very much, Mr. Acharya, for that very comprehensive address. Thank you once again for talking to all of us and sharing with us your perspective. It's time for me to now invite Mr. Rambabu P., Chief Sustainability Officer at the Greenco Group, and I request you now to share with us your thoughts and perspectives. Of course, wherever you're comfortable, if you'd like to. Please welcome him, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. This is the, we are deliberating on the E, S, and G, and how this has become extremely critical for the businesses and especially coming from the investor side. I would like to spend, even though the ESG deliberations are rightly and to some extent not so rightly are dominated by climate change discourse, I would very intentionally spend some time on ESG per se and then come to climate change discourse, which is more urgent. And that is the reason why everybody is speaking about it as much. I always wonder which investor does not want the business where he is investing in to be sustainable. In fact, more he is a family-oriented business, he wants it to be more sustainable. He wants to pass it on to his next generations, the business itself. So which business doesn't want to be sustainable and which investor doesn't want to be sustainable? But more importantly, the reason why the sustainability or E, S, and G became much more important to the investors is basically because more and more investments started dominated by your money and my money, which we are investing for our future, which we are saving for our future. A pension fund managing its capital and trying to put in one industry in India, another industry, or in another business in US is actually managing the money of you and me, and which is our pensions, which is our life insurance, which is our saving. Okay? So more and more capital that got dominated by the long-term interest, okay, and long-term returns, and the businesses started having quarter-to-quarter view of their earnings. So that came into conflict, and as more and more shareholders started demanding the safety of their money, the long-term returns of their money, at the end of the retirement, what will I do? Will I be able to get my money or not? These are some concerns which a number of investment groups started raising. And then came the whole issue of long-term returns vis-a-vis the short-term returns. Short-term shareholder value is absolutely important, but then not at the expense of long-term shareholder value. When you maintain an equipment, you can always maintain an equipment, keep the uptime, okay, hour to hour, day to day, month to month, at the cost of its long-term health. So it's possible in a maintenance. It is possible to do a business where the quarter to quarter, year to year returns are wonderful, but it is so short-sighted that after 5 years that business cannot sustain, or 10 years if business cannot sustain. So it becomes, just as much you're operating an asset or you're managing a laptop, etc., the short-term versus long-term challenges are there. And as a whole in the world, what really happened is that the long-term started becoming shorter and shorter. What I meant by saying is that the climate change, what you thought will come after 50 years, you started seeing it. Some changes that you thought will see after many, many years, the growth. Or another way of looking at it is that the way the GHG accumulation has occurred, whatever that has occurred over something like last 20 centuries, okay, we have a GHG accumulation in 1 century, much more than that, and then last decade, much more than that. The speed at which we are accelerating and growing, okay, is creating a challenge. Hence, the long term became medium term or a short term. Then everybody started seeing the results of not taking action, which is in the interest of the long term shareholder value. And that is the reason why the ESG became much more focused, and rightly so. And most important of that ESG part is the G part of it, which is the governance part of it. The governance part of it is that the board, which is the stewarding, your capital and my capital, your savings and my saving, my pension fund, the board which is stewarding that, is it capable of doing that? Is it completely understand what is its purpose? Okay, is it going to create a long-term shareholder value or compromise along with the management for short-term shareholder value? I think the G becomes extremely important component of the the ESG, and rightly so, a number of investors are focusing on the G very, very, very carefully. And now a little bit, I'll come down because I would spend much more time on climate. Before doing that, okay, let me even talk about the S part of it. Yes, S part of it is extremely important. Okay, unless otherwise the businesses create diversity, equity and inclusion, for example. Diversity, DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, the business is not going to run for a long term. If the business is not going to retain its employees and retain the right talent, not retain all the employees, but retain the right talent, the business is not going to last for longer term when there is almost like a war for talent on the business arena. So it's very, very important for the investors to understand various policies of the business, that how is it going to manage its employees, how is it going to manage its supply chain, how is it going to manage its products. So as far as the product is concerned, I have another take on it, in a sense that we will talk about it later at a circular economy stage. But what is more important is that even the product, is the product causing harm to customer health and safety? What is the product doing? What is the level of delivery, service delivery, value delivery that it is doing? Even though product is able to sell today, and on a long term, will this product sell? Because it is actually harming the customer. It is harming, not creating any further value. So it is very, very important for all the investors to look into as I am coming reverse, ESG, I covered G first, and then I came to S. And there are multiple factors on the S also. I think the other speakers even talked about some of those factors, are absolutely important, right? Now, let us come down a bit to E part of it. The E part of it, in this E part of it, two things that are being talked about by everybody, and rightly so, is the climate change. The next is the circular economy. So I'll spend a little time on both of them, climate change and the circular economy. Why shouldn't investor be bothered about that the climate change, the physical climate change is occurring, and whether your business will be able to manage the floods that can get created on your site? Or did your stormwater drainage that you designed on the site, is it capable of handling the double intense rainfall or 4 times intense rainfall occurring in a short period of time as it occurred in a few days ago in Pakistan or in Bangalore? So will you be able to handle that stormwater? I'm talking about smaller and smaller operational things. Are you able to do that? On top of it, why shouldn't investor be bothered about if you're let us say a pharmaceutical industry and having a coal-based power plant on your site, and the power is coming from coal-based, and you are able to do a good profit because the coal-based power plant is able to deliver a power at a reasonably good price, and that is one of the important factors of your profit. So investors should be bothered about, is this profit sustainable? So when coal-based power plants cannot stand, what will happen to this particular industry? So he needs to understand the regulatory challenges and the physical climate change challenges that come by due to climate change and due to global warming on the investment that he is making. Hence, he is simply bothered about it. For example, if you all can recall, almost early in this decade, end of the previous decade, Lord Stern has written a treatise called Unburnable Carbon. He looked into the listed entities on the London Stock Exchange and looked at their valuation and found that much of their valuation is actually coming from carbon, which can never be burnt if the global warming is limited not to 1.5 degrees centigrade. He said 2 degrees centigrade. A lot of unburnable carbon of a Shell or of a BP or something like that is all listed on the London Stock Exchange, and we all give a nice value, tick, tick, tick value. And if the unburnable carbon can never be harnessed, then the value of the London Stock Exchange listed companies will almost come down by 30% and 40%, up to 30-40%. So, as an investor, I should be bothered about. If the whole energy transition is leading there, what will happen to these guys whose value on stock exchanges is so high? Okay, so it's extremely important for us now to be able to mitigate the global warming, that we need to get to a significantly reduced carbon space by 2030 and almost reach to net zero by 2050 at a global level. And some countries may still afford to reach the net zero by 2070. But this is going to be a huge challenge. The challenge is, one side is the challenge, the other side is an opportunity. I would like to be very short on this particular issue. For India, countries like India, energy has never been an opportunity. Energy has always been, you had coal, but oil and gas always need to be brought from outside, and it has a challenge on foreign exchange, it has challenge on the kind of relationships that we have on external relations, etc. So the energy has never been a sweet spot for India. For the first time, okay, with the renewable energy coming into the space, the energy is becoming a sweet spot for India. It's sun, it's water flow, it's wind, it's many other natural resources, including the biological resources, can now be harnessed to meet, not only to generate the renewable energy, but also to store that renewable energy, variable renewable energy, convert that into a dispatchable energy, and use that dispatchable energy into an electrolyzer and produce green hydrogen, and then produce from there possibly green ammonia, green molecules, green chemicals, and green fuels, and mostly avoid the kind of imports. Imagine this whole transition, energy transition, the geographical, political advantages and disadvantages are also going to change. So India is at an extremely nice sweet spot today to be able to at least plan for, think through the way that we can become energy independent. The Prime Minister of India has already expressed his ambition to become energy independent by 2047. So to us, at Greenco, my company, we are essentially a renewable energy storage, green hydrogen, green fuels, and green molecules company. So for us, the energy independence seems to be something, is a possibility, but really all of us have to struggle and go towards that to harness this opportunity that was presented to India post-industrial revolution. We never had such a nice opportunity. We missed the bus in industrial revolution. Another important point I want to point out here regarding the disruption it can cause is that last many years, what we have seen is a information reorganization. 10, 20, 30 years. This is what we call as digitalization, this and that. It has really changed our lives, the way we do our business. The next 30 years, till 2050, we are going to witness the energy reorganization and materials reorganization. Energy and materials reorganization. The materials reorganization will be driven both by decarbonization and also circular economy. The energy reorganization will be mostly decarbonization. So when I talk about energy reorganization, I am talking about the energy independence. When I come to materials, I really talk about, for example, by 2050, will we be using 100% of the steel drawn from the nature earth, or 50% of the steel drawn from the nature earth and 50% is recycled? The 50% that I am talking about 2050, the 50% that get recycled, will it be from an electric arc furnace driven by a renewable electricity which is dispatchable, which is 24/7? These are the kinds of possibilities we are seeing in the material reorganization. The way we do cement, the way we do steel, the way we do aluminum, zinc, and the way we do pharma, chemicals, food. Most of these things have to change because you need to not only decarbonize, but also reorganize the materials. And materials reorganization, especially the circular economy, is going to almost account for 30% to 40% of the last decarbonization challenge or net zero challenge. So it's very important. We would not be able to address net zero continuing to produce steel or continuing to produce zinc or continuing to produce apparels from drawing the natural resources. A significant part of them have to be through circular economy, and a part of them has to be from the natural resources, but pursuing a process which is almost next to net zero. So that is the kind of a roadmap we are going to have. And why shouldn't investors be bothered about asking you a question that is your business ready for that? Is your business ready to do without that coal-based power plant or a gas-based power plant? Is your business ready and locating your new property, you are in the real estate, your new property is on a coastal area which is likely to get flooded. Okay, or your logistics are passing through a highway which is likely to get flooded, or which is likely to face a number of disruptions, very easily due to the global warming. Why shouldn't investors be there? I think these are the questions that the investors are asking, and that is because they are simply bothered about, and they are representing a long-term shareholder value, because they are representing pension funds, they are representing sovereign funds. So they will ask those questions, and we should also be, even though 90% of the business or 95% of the business is looking at quarter to quarter results, at least that 4% or 5% should continuously nibble and start asking the questions about the long-term shareholder value and start orienting the business towards the long-term shareholder value. And that is the story of the ESG. And the only entity that can actually steward ESG in an organization is its governing board and nobody else. So it's absolutely important, the G part of it is very, very important, to be able to steward the S and E performance of the business, which otherwise can be bothered about quarter to quarter results. So the long-term shareholder value is absolutely important. Yes. And last a few minutes. ESG rating, there's a lot of concern about this word ESG and ESG rating. Same company rated by different rating organizations are getting entirely different rating. And many times ESG rating agencies are doing the ESG rating at the call of the rated company. A rated company gives a job to a rating company to do rating, it gives them the fees. So the ESG rating, the guidelines, procedures, etc., are not well regulated. Hence, there is a lot of gray area in the ESG rating itself. The EU taxonomy and EU has come out with more better standards and also thinking about some level of regulation in the ESG rating and the ESG standards, which the previous speaker also covered a significant part of it, and including our own SEBI is also looking at the standards for ESG rating. And unless otherwise these ESG rating standards are very well done, I think there could be a lot of noise around it. But I think it will not, a serious investor, unless otherwise investor's interest is to checklist. He just is doing a checklist job. Okay, but if he is a serious investor and he wants to use ESG that drives the return on investment, that sort of an ESG fund kind of a mentality, which in India we have one ESG fund, a few ESG funds already. So if that is to be done, I think the ESG standards, frameworks have to be much more robust than what they are today. And it's happening. Okay, it's happening. And I think you and me as business should play a good role so that the standards are well established and they don't deviate and doesn't become unnecessarily, the kind of rating today we have. The situation is not really very welcome situation. I think the regulators have started taking action, and I hope very soon most of the regulation, a good part of the regulation will be in place to govern that. So with this optimistic note, I conclude and thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
We thank you, Mr. Rambabu, for sharing with us those insights. And with that, I now invite Shri Sunil Jain, Operating Partner, Energy Transitions, SR Capital, to address the gathering. Let's all welcome him.
Good morning. You know, the advantage of speaking last or last but one is that your previous speakers have spoken all about the topic what was supposed to be spoken. I hope you don't accuse me of plagiarism of your points, but I want to say that great men think alike, so we all are thinking the same lines. I don't know how many of us know we are in a world of Internet of Things, social media. I just want to give you that the ESG as a word has seen a 5-fold increase on internet searches from 2019. Even though the acronym ESG was coined in 2005, but it is only after this last 12, 14 years that you're suddenly seeing that world is waking up and individuals are waking up and the corporates are waking up to this great acronym ESG. Earlier in India, we had a concept of CSR, which is probably like a subset of ESG today. And it has almost like faded away. Today, CSR is like a mandatory, it is your balance sheet item. So the new word is ESG. Governments and corporations have realized that aspirations of the populations are growing rapidly, but running a business means having to be on the right side of the planet, which we all agree, I hope. This realization is being driven by new realities of growth disparity between the rich and the poor. Climate change is hitting closer to home every year, which my previous speakers have also spoken about. The climate change can be so disastrous. There are a couple of countries in the world who believe that by 2050 they may cease to exist on this planet. Maldives, Mauritius, they could be underwater. So that is the quantum of disaster waiting to happen. And we should not feel that we are all safe. Increasing catastrophic climate events are causing destructions every year. Gender equality is coming into focus across the world, and corporate governance failures are increasingly become common. And therefore, the word ESG becomes extremely important as we analyze each of them. From 90s to the 2000, especially let me talk in context of India, more or less of Europe and US, who evolved much before us, and therefore who tried to impose a lot of things on us, what they have done in the past. But let me look at India, and today I'll focus more on India rather than trying to talk of global perspective on ESG. We had peak emissions in the last 3 decades or 4 decades. 90s, 2000, thermal was the only power what we believed in. And corporations took a very narrow view with the board level committees responsible for environmental, social issues, essentially being non-existence. But as the turn of the century happened, increasingly the governance, ethics, transparency, integrated issues became more commonplace. And why so? Because you started getting funds, started getting investors, you started growing. And the people became more evolved as they got a social media platform to know what is happening, what is right for them and what is wrong for them. So all of you individuals sitting here got more enlightened about your rights, if I was using that word. ESG can cover a wide range of topics, including corporate governance practices, labor practices, sustainable business. Sustainable is another word which is so widely used without we understanding the actual meaning of that word sustainable. And it can be used anyway. Carbon dioxide emissions. Growing amount of research demonstrates a favorable relationship between ESG performance and financial performance. There is no doubt about that. Or for that matter, a value creation in any business. It is so important for any merger, acquisitions, takeovers. But the fact is, in India, if I talk of top 200 corporates, which may be today focused on this acronym of ESG, with proper reportings, board level discussions, and actual implementation in their day-to-day businesses. The study says that even these top 200 corporations are just 30% of what they should be doing. And none of us sitting here, and ASSOCHAM as a forum represents many small and medium enterprises. What about them? There are millions of them across the country. I don't think so we talk about ESG there. Let us, even if we don't talk about S and G, we must talk about E over there. Now that should be our focus area. We all, in all the platforms, all the forums talk about the top 500 FTSE companies in the Europe or world, 1,000 top companies around the world, and they have been started reporting and they have started doing it. Well, they all can do it and they can implement things because they've got large reserves. Everything looks at money. One of my previous speakers said, it is all about money. And let me tell you this, even ESG is all about money. It is nothing, at the core of the heart, nobody is bothered about the S and E. They realize that without ESG, there is no money for the corporations. And for me, all the medium and small enterprises, you will face tremendous problems if you don't start focusing it now. From the 2010, fortunately, the growth and prominence of responsible investing with brand reputation management due to ESG has started to become a business imperative for the corporates. And again, I'm saying when I talk of corporates, I talk of large corporations. So they are doing definitely much more than they were doing in the past decade. Sustainability and ESG are on the verge of a hockey stick growth. Curve driven by investors, regulators, boards, CEOs, employees, suppliers, and customers. Every stakeholder has to be involved. You cannot say that I am doing it because my board has given me a mandate, but if you don't involve the entire value chain, including the government, I doubt this is going to be successful. There have been an exponential growth in investments from 31 trillion in 2018 to 61 trillion US dollars. Regulations around ESG is growing to 172 laws in 2018 versus 46 only in 2016. So the focus is there and everybody is focusing. It's not that people are not doing enough, everybody is doing enough. But is that enough? Or much more needs to be done? Like we need much more to be done on the climate change. You have a carbon across-border tax looming large from Europe. What are these? These are taxes or pressure tactics on you to take care of your carbon score. We as human beings always are disciplined by force. We are never disciplined. Never, I repeat, never disciplined by love. Even a parent, no matter how much they love their child, they use the stick when it's required to discipline him. All the large corporations, why did they have the biometric system? They had to discipline the employees for coming on time. That is how it started. Later on, it got integrated into the HR system. That's a different matter. So I still believe that you have to have a carrot and stick approach to ESG for all large corporates and medium corporates. We would have to leave small corporates for the time being and give them a much longer rope in doing it. But I still believe ESG is being driven by employees as much as the board, as much as the top management. You have to involve them, and people should look for jobs which they believe will enhance their value in terms of the ESG score. See, investors have been talking of investing in ESG scores and companies which are compliant and all, but now I have seen increasingly a direct relationship between sustainable corporate policies and practices and performance. If you are delivering that, investors are more happy than just having a sustainability report, which my previous talked about that there are very serious sustainability reports announced every year by the large corporates. Can you please pick up some of the 5 year sustainability reports of a ordinary corporate house? Don't be surprised if you find para after para have been just photocopied into the next report next year. I've seen examples of that. So that's so much for the sustainability report. No doubt ESG is important today because the money which is coming from whether ESG bonds, the green bonds, what we call them, or the investors, you mentioned about pension funds, they're all concerned about it. And rightly so, they're putting pressure on the corporates wherever they're investing money. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, they have to look at the overall economic metrics of what they're investing and how they're investing. We have to do much more. You know, there was last year, 2006, only $1.3 trillion has been raised through supply of green loans, of which 1 trillion has arrived since 2016 as business adopted green purchases. You announced it, but actual money came in much later. Let me talk about the boards. We have practices, SEBI and regulators in India are doing a lot. You've got an NRC committee, you've got an audit committee. Where do we have an ESG committee on the board today? Any board which has an ESG committee, as good as mandated by the law, the company affairs, and I would request Mr. Garg to throw some light because he's been in the finance ministry earlier. Do we have a mandated ESG committee on the board? It's high time we had one. The boards have to, link purpose with strategy, tying the two together in light of ESG. There are various frameworks. I can't want to go under the SCORE framework or whatever it is. There are many frameworks. If the corporates want to adopt, they can do it. The KPIs of all the top managements have to be aligned to the ESG scores. As somebody said, ESG scores can be different. Well, let the corporates create an ESG score and let it be audited. You've got audits, let it be audited. Let a framework for audit be created by government, and the auditors will take care of the rest. But the compensations of all the top management, including the board of directors, should be linked to what they have done in the ESG. For me, E is much simpler to do compared to S and G. G is a problem because the people who frame the policies are actually governing it. And therefore, they need a leeway somewhere or the other. I've been a CEO for 15 years and I know it. The biggest sufferer in this has been S. I think so. The boards and the corporates have not done enough on S. We are doing it. We adopt a village, we got foundations, we do it, not as corporates. There's a wide range of activity under S, which probably it's difficult for corporates to do it. But if they join hands, I think so. S is one thing which is going to hit them back if it is not addressed today. You are dependent on that S, that social fabric of your society, the social fabric of the environment needs to be handled with gloves, kids' glove. So that is something which we must do, and the role of the top management must be aligned with what KPIs board gives to the management. You cannot just slide it away and say that, okay, it is difficult for me to manage. Now, for all this to happen, regulators have to come into play, which I have already said, and regulators at both local and global level need to collaborate effectively. It cannot be that Europe comes out with a guideline and India is at wits what to do. That cannot happen. So everybody has to align together to collaborate and effectively come out with ESG regulations which are practical and give a slightly long rope. You cannot do it overnight. We have given enough long rope, but let's target that 2030, everybody in the world will be aligned on these ESG regulations and policies. Normally E comes first, but for me, S and G is important, cannot be left out. G has caused a lot of heartburns across the world. We have had a lot of crises. Subprime crisis created a social upheaval across the world. People lost jobs. Now, that was more of a governance failure than an environment or a social failure. Investors therefore play a crucial role in monitoring the governance, monitoring the environment scores. So I at least would put a recommendation to be, ESG needs to be developed into a balance sheet item. It should reflect as a loss or a profit on your balance sheet, and government has to work out on a score, on a value of that score. That if you are in that value, you can add so many dollars to your balance sheet, and if you have not, you have to show a line item which is a loss. Automatically, everybody, the board and the management and everybody will get aligned, including the people. And therefore, this S will also get aligned. You have to assign a monetary value to S and G. Nobody, I again repeat, the biggest thing is money. You assign monetary values, everybody will fall in track. Well, we've been all talking about the role of governments, corporates, NGOs, and so and so. What about the role of common man? Nobody talks about that. Do we know that all the disasters which happened in last decade, 50% of the disasters were man-made? Man is responsible for 50%, 8% of the disasters, hurricanes, whatever is happening in this world. And therefore, each one of us sitting here has a responsibility. You know, when Abraham Lincoln talked about government, I would like to say that the only planet is Earth, and this is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Therefore, the individuals have to be prominent component and also need to be made accountable for E&S through their actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Now it's time for us to release the knowledge report, which has been jointly prepared by ASSOCHAM and our knowledge partner, CRISIL. I'll request Mr. Pranav Master, Director Consulting Sustainability at CRISIL Market Intelligence and Analytics, to please also join us on the stage as we formally unveil this report. And of course, I'm going to request our guest of honor, Shri S.C. Garg, to kindly now officially unveil this report. Also requesting our other dignitaries to join us in this official release of the knowledge report. Like I mentioned, has been jointly prepared by ASSOCHAM and our knowledge partner, CRISIL, towards sustainable infrastructure. Thank you. And with that, we've come to a moment where everyone's been waiting to listen to our guest of honor, Shri S.C. Garg. And I invite him now. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome him with a huge round of applause, please.
Can we put this off? I think still it is morning, so good morning to you all. Nice to be here. And to talk on a subject which is so fascinating, so important. I think you heard our industry experts, the ESG experts, and I think the sense of the climate change, the world coming to an end, rising temperatures, enormously enhanced regulatory, investor, other compliance burdens, etc., gives you a sense that possibly we are not very far off from the day of the catastrophe. So I'm not the doomsdayer here. And what I'll try to do to speak on this subject today is to sort of go a little bit into why we have come to this stage today. And then what exactly is required to sort of pull us back from the precipice, if I may say so. What we have done so far is basically an investor and the regulator-driven sort of agenda on ESG, which is resting on three big things, which is compliance, reporting, and the rating. That's all the world which is today the ESG world. I don't think seriously the government, the companies, businesses are too much interested about the sustainability as such. But it's not a bad thing. The business is to sort of produce goods and services and make profit for everyone. That's the business. If there is no profit at the end of the day, there is no point in doing business. I think nobody will do it. You're not in charity, right? And therefore, if the ecosystem or the accompanying conditions in which you do a business makes you to earn profit at the cost of environment or at the cost of sort of equity, which is basically the S part, or doing bad governance practices, I think you can do it. And you would like to do it. 99% of us would like to do it that way. And therefore, if you look at it, basically and fundamentally, much of the and I think there are three key sort of concerns on the environment front. One is this carbon, which all of us talk about. The second one is the pollution, which not many of us talk about, but is the real concern for a country like India. If you're living in a country where 17 out of 20 top cities in the world are the most polluted city in the country, I think you should be bothered too much about pollution. Delhi winters are coming, and what the kind of hell Delhi becomes on account of pollution, not on account of carbon, that way, is something I think we should all be worried about. Pollution is local, carbon is global. So the pollution is also something which is an extremely important element of the climate or the environment which we should be worried about. And the third one, which is now acquiring some traction, is the waste. The circular economy concept is basically on the waste management, the way we have sort of polluted our rivers, seas now, plastics, so much of the solid waste, the mountains of the waste outside the core of Delhi here. So these are the three key concerns on the environment side: the carbon, the pollution, and the waste. And these have come to be where we are because the policies which we pursued or the business model which we pursued, you see, the population rose and the requirement of production of goods and services rose very high. 200 years back, we were only one sort of billion people. Today, we are 8 billion people. If 8 billion people have to eat, you have to produce more of food. If they have to live, you have to make more of houses, etc., etc. And you have to produce a lot of goods and services. And goods and services, besides on the land, you produce by using materials, steel, etc., has come up. But the biggest element which is there into this entire production system is the energy. I think the data are all reasonably well known of about 20 odd billion tons of the material which we take out from the earth, bottom of the earth. Roughly about 80% of 15 or 16 billion is only fossil fuels. And when they get burned or used in the process, they produce all the carbon dioxide and they also produce all the pollution literally. Whether it's the sulfur oxide or nitrogen oxide and things like this. So the model of the production system in the world, which is based so much on the fossil fuel use, and we pursued policies where if you socialize the pollution or if you socialize the carbon, the business can transfer that cost to the people or to the climate. That's how it worked. There was no cost on socializing or making the emissions of carbons and the pollutions out. I think you all hearing from 2015, the government is trying to sort of make it mandatory for the coal power producers to install in the equipments to sort of arrest sulfur oxide and the nitrogen oxide, but those are being postponed because the industry is not in a position to do it. So the reason to my mind, fundamental reason why we have come to this pass is that we have adopted a certain kind of model. And that might have made sense because that was perhaps the only way the energy could be used at that time. Now, when we are in this crisis, in this situation, fortunately for us, there is an alternative system of energy production coming up. Hydrogens, the renewables, wind, solar, and pumped hydro and many other things are coming up which make the use of energy, an alternate energy, equally efficient and perhaps quite competitive. And therefore, to my mind, the way we should go forward is instead of focusing too much on compliances, which, as has been mentioned very well, is becoming more of a sort of ticking kind of job just to impress the regulator and the investors that yes, we are doing everything what we can do, and without really making any difference to that. And it's very important to adopt the right kind of strategies and the right kind of policies to make that transition, the change happen. Otherwise, like it was mentioned, that in the industrialization bus we missed. We missed industrialization bus because we adopted wrong policies. We sort of reserved the entire production of basic metals and others for the public sector. We did not allow private sector to come in. And a lot of policy choices, small industry reservations, etc., that made us most or quite uncompetitive in the industrial space, and we missed it. But today, the two big waves which are coming up and offer the big opportunities, the wave of digitalization and the wave of environmental production, which is mostly of energy, if we get right kind of policies adopted, we can perhaps catch this bus very, very well. And for that, let me just illustrate what we can do and what we are doing. Energy is cost to most of the businesses. Their primary production is the goods and service which they produce. And therefore, if the energy is available to them at a cheaper cost than the conventional energy, they would be very happy to use it. But if it is not available, they would not like to use it. They will devise all kind of exceptions and other things to do it. Likewise, if production of a sustainable or environmentally sustainable product option is better than an environmentally non-sustainable one, then the business will produce that. But if it is not that cheaper or it's not that competitive, that not advantageous, it will not do it. And therefore, just to illustrate the two policies which we can adopt to make that kind of change or change the incentives for the businesses, so energy should be cheaper, right? Should we produce energy in the country, or should we have the energy at cheaper cost? This is a choice. Just look at the way we have regulations now, the policy regulations from the government, that for import of solar cells and the modules attract a very high rate of duty as compared to what if you produce in the country. We are not producing the basic material, the silicons and the cells in the country. You will add value at some stages by importing something basic from somewhere, from the rest of the world, like we are doing on the mobile side or something. it will reduce your import cost to some extent because some part of the value, but it will, if you provide extra protection in the form of tariff, that much cost of production will become inefficient in the country. And now, as a result, we will have costlier renewable system to produce energy. Now, we should think about whether it's advisable or it's better off for us to see that the energy is produced in a cheaper way than make in India, because cheaper energy might allow us to produce much cheaper final products. That is something which we should also think about, that renewables are in a way of producing energy. It will substitute another energy which we are importing, the energy in the form of oil, gas, etc. So relatively, is it better to produce or import the renewables without much of the duty, which will substitute the fossil fuels imported elsewhere, or not? So I think policy choices will need to be, rather than getting into the emotions of Make in India, we should be real businessmen to see what will make our ultimate product cheaper and competitive. Mr. Jain mentioned about that money makes all the difference. Now, we have this system of value-added taxation, right? So you buy certain inputs, you pay tax on it. When you use it, you produce it, and in the final you pay the tax minus the input tax which you have paid, right? And the value, and the most of the businesses are so focused on to see that their total tax burden on the value which they add is reduced, and that is why they use most of the competitive industries, technologies, and other kind of things. If we tweak the model a little bit more to put a tax on the negative value add, and the negative value add is basically the carbon, the pollutant, and the waste. If we can quantify this, for example, it's easy to say, and there's a lot of carbon pricing going on around that if you produce 1 ton, or if you add 1 ton of, let us say, carbon dioxide, this is the cost of it. Likewise, you can put a cost on the sulfur dioxide and the waste element, or the waste produced otherwise. And it may not be very many, it may be about 15, 20 major sort of carbon pollutants and the waste which will require to be dealt with. And if we put a negative value add by sort of taxing the carbon and the pollutant and the waste which we have added, not what we have bought. If something has been bought, somebody who supplied would suffer that kind of cost. Then the incentives would change so drastically that people will look for the alternative technologies, an alternative way of producing goods and services, using those technologies, those methods, and those processes which will sort of contribute less of the carbon. You might actually incentivize it by sort of putting a positive payment for the reduction in the negative value add, or if your process can reduce the carbon content or the pollutant content and the waste content of that, then the government should actually be rewarding that. It will put positive incentives. Coal power versus the renewable power, the incentives can change. If some suffers the tax and the other one gets an incentive. So what I'm trying to say is that the real things which will make difference are something which we must be focusing on. And that is where the Indian competitiveness, as it was mentioned very rightly, that we have a right kind of opportunity in the renewable space. We are doing very well, and we can still do much better in the digital space. And these, to my mind, these two are the future competitive advantages. The digitalization and the environmental production of the goods and services, these will make the change. Even the finances should look at, rather than the compliances to satisfy someone, that what will make the alternative technological use to be much better and more competitive and more profitable to make that businesses, to finance that businesses. So I think we should be focusing more on this. Besides the environment, which I discussed about, the social and the governance are also important. In fact, there is much bigger challenge in times to come on the social side. Because the way the technological progress has moved, after the machines which replace the human labor in last 150 years, that machine, it's good for that. The industrialization has been very, very good for the humanity. The fact that population expanded so much, the fact that we live much longer today, the fact that we live much better today, and the world as a whole is much richer, is the contribution of the industrialization. But the industrialization also brought, these pollutants and other kind of things, it also brought the redundancy of labor. The labor is much less required than earlier. And now with this artificial intelligence, machine learnings, digital driving and other kind of things coming up, there would be still lesser labor requirement in time to come. And this time it's the mind labor or the intellectual labor which is going to suffer a little bit more than what earlier suffered. But that's not a problem. If we can produce goods and services required by everyone with lesser use of labor, the humanity should know how to use that value add to keep these people also happy. Can you have more sports? Can you have more of learning? Can we have more people in education? Can we have more people in entertainment and other kind of things? And that is the way the future labor relations will perhaps have to be sourced, rather than compliance on the kind of wages paid or the gender neutral policies and kind of things. So I think we should look at the current times as more of the opportunities which are coming up, and look at the challenges which the past model, the industrialization model, has thrown as a way to get around and make the future much better. I think this ESG summit today will discuss many of these issues, and I think we should be able to come up with some thinking that how can we make our government policies much better, our businesses much more profitable, and our people on the whole much happier and more prosperous and healthier. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Shri Garg, for talking to us, and it is indeed a privilege and honor for all of us to have you here this morning, speak to us and share with us your thoughts. Thank you, and with that, we've almost come to an end of this session. Before we formally conclude, I'll request Shri Kapil Malhotra to once again give the concluding remarks and also propose a formal vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I started with the good morning address, and now probably the afternoon has started. Well, on behalf of ASSOCHAM and on my personal behalf, it is indeed a great privilege and pleasure for me to propose a hearty vote of thanks to Shri S.C. Garg, the former Secretary Ministry, Shri Prabodh Acharya, Co-Chairman ASSOCHAM, and also this is Chief Sustainability Officer for GSW Group. Shri Ram Babu, the Chief Sustainability Officer, Greenco Group. Shri Sunil Jain, Operating Partner, Energy Transitions, SR Capital. So I would like to thank all of you for responding favorably to our request for addressing today's conclave. The respective speakers have shed light on the issues confronting ESG framework in the country. The concluding remarks from Mr. Garg were highlighting the fact that probably the government direction also needs to be going towards the ESG framework. So we are thankful to the government for the priority according to this sector, which will have a far-reaching impact on the growth rate and the manufacturing competitiveness of the country. Because that's what probably you said, that the profitability also should be a measure of whatever the ESG practices are going to lead us to. So I'm thankful to all the dignitaries on the dais for the very thought-provoking addresses and important suggestions made for the net zero growth through the ESG. I'm also sure a lot of panelists are there now in front of us. I'm very sure the tone of discussion set in the panel discussion and more suggestions will come out in the course of deliberations during the whole day. I think it's going to be very, very fruitful for all of us. Lastly, I would like to extend my very, very special thanks to all the respected speakers in the panel session, participants and friends from media who have very kindly joined us this morning to make this event a success. With these few words, I would not like you to stop further over here. The tea session is open and please, I welcome you all to have the tea session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll break for a quick 10-minute tea break, and we'll request you to please keep it to 10 minutes only. We are running behind schedule, so request everyone to please keep it to only 10 minutes. Feel free to bring back your cups of tea and coffee to your seats, and we will begin our next session in the next 10 minutes from now. Thank you.
Companies who are going for a sustainable drive, apart from the annual report, they are also putting up the sustainability report, which is becoming mandatory now. It may be an integrated report or it may be a separate report, but a sustainability report is also becoming a part of the annual report for most of the organizations across the globe, including India. And setting the long-term priorities, making the ESG issues embedded and factored in concept, vision, mission, and implementation at multiple levels, which are the steps probably in the right direction at the moment, considering the current scenario. Moreover, to move the ESG conversation from the boardroom to a level of operational transformation, it is critical to embrace circularity across operations while appreciating how the circular economy is becoming a business imperative and not just a reporting consideration. Now, it's a fact, let me tell you that somewhere around 10 years back in Singapore, I know that the management over there, the government over there, had seen to it that there is a water circularity, and whatever was the waste water treatment coming out of the effluents, it was at least used for the washing purposes or the plant purposes. Probably now at 2020 onwards, they claim to have achieved 100% water circularity, even making the water potable now. So this is probably the barometer which is there in front of us in India, that not even to make a water circularity in terms of just using in the industrial usage of the water, but also see to it making it potable, to see to it that each human being gets there is no wastage of water. So vital to achieving the ESG transformation for a company is to simultaneously pursue the digital transformation. This is something very, very important. In fact, the life cycle assessment analysis, there are a lot of software companies now who are doing the end of life or the life cycle assessment. In fact, our company itself is going through one of that for our products. So this will focus on digitizing business models and operational processes and aim at reducing the frictions, increasing productivity, elevating profitability, and improving the customer experience. The risks, the compliances, performances, sustainability issues, and pitfalls, all required to be measured against the ESG parameters, and this can only be feasible with the help of digital tools and processes. So I think all this is, pretty well known to us, and in fact, we are an economy which is pretty well digitalized. Let me tell you that very proudly, a lot of my European counterparts or European customers say that we in India, or our company, or our businesses from India, wherever they deal with, we are much more digitally advanced than those guys are. I think this is a credit to our own processes. So probably our own strength in the software and digitalization process will help us in moving towards the ESG goal much faster than probably what we can imagine. We are glad to have a very strong panel of industry leaders, sustainability officers, some of them are present over here, financial institutions on the subject. I would encourage all of you to make this forum more interactive and leverage the views and insights of the experts who would address us during the discussions. I would also like to extend my very special thanks to all the sponsors, respected speakers in the panel discussion session, participants and friends from media who have very kindly joined us in this morning. And I thank you very much for patiently listening to me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra, for your remarks. And it's time for me to now invite Shri Prabodh Acharya, the co-chairman of the ASSOCHAM National Council for Environment and Climate Change. He's also Chief Sustainability Officer at the JSW Group. I'll request you to now share with us your thoughts and perspective. Please welcome him with a round of applause, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Good morning, friends. Respected dignitaries in the dais. I was wondering while listening today to Kapilji, being a business leader talking about sustainability and taking charge of sustainability, I was so feeling pleased. It was like music to my ears. So I am a sustainability professional. My job is to convince these people to integrate sustainability into their business practices. So thank you very much for taking that lead, and I'm so pleased today. And I see this trend increasingly getting integrated, sustainability getting integrated into the business practices across the globe and specifically in Indian corporates. I always call that I come from a very small tribe, but the CSO tribe is becoming a community nowadays. And that's a good sign, those who are in this professional fields. I was asked to give a keynote in the capacity of co-chair of ASSOCHAM National Council for Environment and Climate Change. And this time, therefore, I thought, let me talk something about how to build resilient industry growth through ESG and how to unlock low carbon future for the businesses. I sincerely believe, people talk about sustainability has many meanings, and I have not really had two people agreeing on the same definition as yet. But one thing everybody agrees, one language, that's the money language. And everybody in the business specifically accept the fact true building of a business practices is to have a healthy bottom line, and that is possibly the sustainability meaning is. And we get different terms evaluating evaluations of different terms through different phase of the time as we go forward. So we had about triple bottom line, we had about sustainability. Nowadays we are hearing ESG, the term coined possibly 15 years before. But that's getting momentum right now. One thing, before I start my keynote, which I have prepared this time, to speak and to reconfirm my idea, those who are familiar with CSRs, and 2% of your profit is CSR. But believe me, 100% of your profit is sustainability. Well, with that, let me read out my prepared speech now. See, the industrial sector has evolved considerably in the past year to include a notable emphasis on environmental, social, and governance practices. The rising focus on ESG performance is based on the increasing indications which show that companies benefit when they have policies in place for managing and quantifying ESGs. Without quantifications, we can't really know what's the benefit. While efforts towards the same have long been comprehended a cost center, and that is what I was accustomed to when I started my career 30 years before, and I used to be always backbencher because we ask always for money. In recent years, that notion has been refuted, and ESG management has been recognized at the center of incredible value creations for an organization. We saw some example, Kapilji talking before me. With more and more leaders recognizing that ESG and sustainable growth strengthen financial resilience and overall performance, it is an opportune moment to say that accelerated industry growth can be achieved through embarking on a journey of sustainable evolution. Organizations with a strong focus on sustainability, what I mean is that when the sustainability is integrated to business practices, endure reduced cost of capital due to better risk management, enhance investor perception, and we heard just before that how each investor are nowadays asking questions on ESG performance, and believe me, as the Chief Sustainability Officer of a group, nowadays majority of my time is going to spend with the investor responding to their questions. Enhance and increase access to sustainable financing market, and that is where JSW is a classic case where we raised almost $2 billion last year in sustainability linked financial instruments. ESG compliance also steers various other factors like revenue growth, profitability, customer satisfaction, and employee retention among many of those. Solid ESG credentials therefore bolster the organization's bottom line while simultaneously enhancing their access to the capital of the capital as well. Evidence points to a strong positive correlation between financial and ESG performance. As part of it can be accredited to saving achieved through reduced energy consumptions, more efficient use of resources, which Kapilji alluded to, the circular economy, and all these examples what we see. However, a strong ESG focus also allows companies to seize new business opportunity that might otherwise have been inaccessible to them. The case in example, what we see, the growth in the renewable sector and the energy transitions. And you must be hearing a term called clean tech after fintech being so popular nowadays. So these are the opportunities, new opportunities when you talk about ESG. Such clear financial benefit make a compelling case for the organizations to take a leading role in setting and aligning sustainability and financial targets. Let me talk about global risk. The Global Risk Report 2022, which every year since last 10-15 years World Economic Forum is publishing through a global risk perception survey that gathered insight from nearly 1,000 global experts and leaders who responded to that global risk perception survey. The report confronts us with a worrying reality. Societal and environmental concern takes the forefront in leading the list. Asked to take a view of the past 2 years, responded to the GRPS, which is Global Risk Perception Survey, perceives societal risk as those that have worsened the most since the pandemic began. However, over the 10-year horizon, the health of the planet dominates the concern. Environmental risks are perceived to be the 5 most critical long-term threats to the world and therefore to the business. The most potentially damaging to people and planet with climate action failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, these are the top 3 risks from the risk perception survey in that order. Responded to the GRPS ranked climate action failure as the number 1 long-term threat to the world and the risk with potentially the most severe impact over the next decade. Climate change is already manifesting rapidly in the form of droughts, fires, flood, resource scarcity, and species loss, among other impacts. In last year, if you see multiple cities around the world, as Indians, we are very familiar with the extremities of the weather, but it is now the world is experiencing with the temperature not seen before years. Such a record high of 42.7 degrees in Madrid over a 72-year low of minus 19 degrees centigrade in Dallas. And regions like the Arctic Circle have average summer temperature to be 10 degrees centigrade higher than in the previous years. So government, business and societies are facing increasing pressure to thwart these worst consequences. While COVID-19 lockdown saw a global dip in greenhouse gases, we saw clear sky and many pictures coming that Himalaya is being seen from the distance. Upward trajectory soon resumed once the COVID faded out. The GHG emissions rate rose faster in 2020 than the average over the last decade. Countries continuing down the path of reliance on carbon-intensive sector risk losing competitive advantage through a higher cost of carbon, reduced resilience, failure to keep up the technological innovation, and limited leverage to trade agreements. We have seen EU ETS price touching almost $100 or 87, 80 euros. Yet shifting away from carbon-intense industries will trigger economic volatility, deepen unemployment, and increase societal and geopolitical tensions. Adopting hasty environmental policy will also have unintended consequences of future. And please remember, I represent a group which we have carbon-intensive industries. So therefore, it is more important for organizations like us to align ourselves with low-carbon pathway. So it is thus accurate to say that business risk perception across the globe is irrecoverably undergoing a systemic change, with environmental and societal risk taking predominance in global risk perception. However, it is essential to exercise prudence and ensure that the delicate balance between mitigative, restorative, and preventive actions and policy changes and their actual impact on society, environment, and the economy remains undisturbed. A transition that fails to account for these implications will exacerbate inequalities within and between countries. If the 3 trends, if you see glowing, inequality is one of them. A rapid decarbonization would increase economy and societal disruption in the short term, while a slower pace with fewer short-term impacts would entail much larger cost and greater disorderliness in the long term. Historically, organizations have shielded externalities that arise from their operations. However, sustainability reporting these days is a must. That again, I'll borrow from Kapilji, you stated how it is increasing reporting. On a global scale, the voluntary framework and legislative instruments that currently guide ESG disclosure are in a state of rapid evolutions. In recent years, organizations have had to determine independently which of the numerous voluntary ESG performance standards are best suited to their operation and to the stakeholder demanding data. As pressure for ESG data intensifies, legally mandated disclosure obligations are becoming increasingly common, with more looming on the horizon. I call it we are in an alphabet soup, and there are standard or framework like GRI, SSAB, TCFD, now TNFD, CDP, and there are many terms. So making a sense out of the alphabet soup. we need to go for an acronym stew so that it should be palatable to us.